Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Altitude Accelerator. This is Tech Uncensored. My name is Tessie Jones at the Metaverse and 5G conference in Toronto. And today I'm happy to present David Krauss of Ciena. And so, David, you're one of the speakers at Metaverse. You have an interesting title. You're a packet architect in the office of the CTO.
Correct.
So tell me about your company. Tell me about
Sure.
your role and what you're actually doing to adapt to the advancement of the metaverse.
Sure. Ciena Corporation is a networking services, systems, and software company. We basically provide equipment and software and other services that fuel or that provide the bandwidth for networks today, and the internet being a large portion of that. I'm in the office of the CTO, where I'm exploring new architectures, new networking architectures, and new technologies that can advance the whole concept of providing more bandwidth and lower latency and more intelligent and automated networks.
Okay. So we know decentralization is a big part of what the future holds. So when we talk about centralization of things, that's going to go away. So I think from your perspective, that's going to, and with I guess the emergence of 5G, that's going to change things a little bit, right?
Well, okay, so let's break that question down a little bit. So decentralization is one of the key components of what we talk about now with the metaverse. It's also the key premise behind Web3, which is a technology or a set of technologies that may or may not wind up being the underpinnings of the metaverse. So it is not guaranteed that the concept of decentralization will be successful. Now, that being said, we're off to a pretty good start in terms of how it's progressing. And I'll throw out one example. So there's a company called Helium Networks, which successfully built a decentralized wireless communications network for low-power devices. And the way that works is a person would buy their own wireless antenna, and this then allowed them to build a network and provide connectivity through their own internet connection. Because this was a low-powered network, it worked quite well. They're now trying to do this using 5G technology. The question is, how scalable is this going to be? And how in the sort of the ecosystem of wireless networks will this play with the larger, more established players? One way to look at it is that this will help the larger players fill in spots that may not be economical for them to deploy equipment. Another way to look at it is it may be a threat to their user base. So I think decentralization is not a sure bet at this point. It has a fantastic philosophy behind it, but we're still in the early days of figuring out how to truly make it work and make it work scalably.
So when you're talking about this concept of ownership in the new web, you're saying that it's still early day to figure out whether or not it's scalable, whether or not people want it, whether or not we can even do it.
Yeah, it's really a question of whether the concepts that have now been developed, that we think we have a good handle on, whether they can scale and wind up being used practically and then self-sufficiently in sort of a I don't know, maybe a circular, decentralized economy.
Okay. So maybe we should go back and define these things, because I've seen the concept or even the definition of metaverse being used interchangeably with Web3. So can you be the person that clarifies this for us?
Well, I can be a person that can attempt to help put some common terms around what we're talking about, because the metaverse means different things to different people. And I think at this point, it's still a little hard to define exactly what it is. And I don't necessarily want to be the one person who stands up and says, I know what it is, and this is what it is. No, I'm just going to throw out some concepts that I think, I hope we can all kind of agree to use as groundwork or common ground, I should say. So at its core, the metaverse is an immersive, interactive, persistent virtual space or set of platforms that is interconnected and interoperable. But the key is really an immersive, interactive space. Now, it is also the evolution of the internet. So the internet has primarily been two-dimensional for most of us, and this will be a shift to a three-dimensional internet. The final point about the metaverse is that it will be based on, but will not be defined by Web3 technologies. So when we talk about Web3 technologies, we're talking about things like blockchain, NFTs, DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, cryptocurrencies. That's the basis of the decentralization we were talking about earlier. But the metaverse and Web3 are two different things. The metaverse may be enabled by Web3 technologies, but there's nothing to say that the metaverse could not wind up being more centralized.
Interesting. I didn't realize that. I actually thought that it was like a subset, and that when you're in a virtual world, how you play in that world is based on the environment that you're given. And so a blockchain is not necessarily part of like a Decentraland, for example.
But it is.
For a Decentraland, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, because it can help track assets, digital assets. But I did want to say that the metaverse, Web3 may be a technological component of the metaverse.
Okay.
But extended reality and augmented reality and virtual reality, that too is a component of the metaverse. And additionally, something like going beyond just sight and sound and touch. There could be taste and smell. That could be components, technological components that comprise the metaverse, or may be required actually to make the metaverse a truly immersive experience.
Okay, interesting. So let's get back to this concept. Let's assume that metaverse and Web3 take hold, and decentralization becomes, I guess, part of the norm in the future, as well as alternative currency. So how much does this have an impact on the telecom industry? And more importantly, what needs to change from a governance perspective?
Yeah, so I guess I'll first start off by referencing my earlier example of the helium network. So that could definitely be a way that decentralization affects telecommunications networks. There are a lot of complexities to that, though. In the example I gave, we were talking about wireless access, but ultimately, the wireless access points require connectivity to the internet, which is provided by a wire line. I'm not seeing any potential disruption, say, in a more traditional wireline telecommunications space when it comes to something like decentralized technologies. In terms of the governance, I'm not sure it's going to affect that much either. I mean, typically when I try to wrap my head around what is the metaverse going to do, and what is going to be required to make it work, and what are carriers or service providers, what are they going to need to do? I think more along the increasing amounts of bandwidth and lower latency and additional compute and storage. Those are the kind of characteristics I think are going to be top of mind. It's what's going to be the biggest focus for telecom providers because the metaverse is going to require elements that we have in place today, just a whole lot more of them. When I think about a resource like bandwidth,
I got it.
or computation. Yeah, I'm not seeing a disruption, say, to a traditional telecom provider.
Okay.
For decentralized.
Okay. This is more of when I think of governance, I think of this from the perspective of identity. And especially when you start creating, let's say, alternative personas or, NFTs, et cetera, and
Okay.
a virtual version of me, how much does that impact how you govern or identify, like, who is real within this space and who's a person behind that?
And actually that was just discussed in the conference here. Yes,
okay.
Amazing discussion, specifically about identity. And indeed, there are some very big rocks ahead of us right now in terms of the metaverse. So identity management or privacy, governance, as you mentioned in this context. There's also accessibility, commerce, and a lot of these go back to standards. So there's an issue with the interoperability between platforms that exist today. So take, for example, places like Decentraland, or Roblox, or Sandbox, or even Horizons World. These are specific instances of platforms that are not necessarily compatible with each other. There's now been a push, and there's an organization was created just a few months ago called the Metaverse Standards Forum, which is a place that is trying to pull together what the standards are. They're not going to be creating any standards, but they're trying to help identify what standards need to exist and how the whole ecosystem can come together to build these standards. That, I think, relates directly to your question of governance. But there's also ethical issues.
Oh, absolutely.
There's safety issues.
I see that.
Affordability issues, inclusivity issues.
Well, education. I mean, this is the one thing that I worry about is my mom. Will she understand how to use this, and will she adopt? I can see younger kids adopting this. I don't see how somebody who's been around for a while and they're so used to things being done at within a centralized structure, whether or not they're going to adopt this. But I think time will tell, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, one of the premises of the metaverse is sort of a creator economy. So the whole idea is for the participants to be creating what they're experiencing. And one of the things I've come across is this concept of codeless programming. So think of Minecraft, where you're kind of dragging and dropping. And now extend that even a little bit further in terms of it's not just something you build or put on top, but it's functions or actions that result, say, from pressing a button. I don't know if that's going to help your grandmother, but it may help you and I to actually be able to create inside the metaverse without being one of the few people who are, coding experts. Absolutely. In the languages that underlie everything.
It democratizes it for every young person that wants to get into the space.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
All right, one last question.
Okay.
So you seem to have confidence in the emergence of this space?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that was just discussed today is that what we're seeing is a convergence of all kinds of different technologies. All of these technologies are going to be enabling. And so I think we're at the very cusp of some of these key enabling technologies starting to coalesce and come together. There's a long road ahead, and we shouldn't be surprised at just how surprised we may be and how quickly some of these things may come together, put in the hands of the right innovative people. But I've got confidence that there's going to be a level of creation and pulling together on this that will amaze us all in the coming years.
It's well said. David, thank you for coming by.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.